Okay, last word on this about this balancing act of values and value that we're kind of seeing on display with the China trip.
I think it's important to keep in mind that the human rights abuses that occur with China do not stop at Chinese borders. China and Russia, according to the NORAD commander, are regularly more actively buzzing our north. China has interfered in Canadian elections. There is more to be considered here than the plight of the Uyghurs, though that is also something that we should be preoccupied with. The reality is that we would not be entertaining this conversation with China if the Prime Minister had actually followed through on his promise to deliver a new economic and security partnership with the United States. Now we're backed into a corner of having friends in China and Qatar because we failed to secure the most important trade relationship that we have.
Right. Well, the U.S. plays a role in that too, though, Kate. Like, let's be fair.
How do we think the U.S. is going to respond to pulling back from Taiwan? How do we think that might look to the U.S.?
With Donald Trump, I'm not going to predict anything because I have no idea.
I don't think it'll be viewed favorably.
Today is Tuesday, January 13th. My name is Miloš Krajčnik. This is Canuck News. Guys, I have this awesome article for us today. This story, I think it's a much wider story that is being told here. There's a wider geopolitical play behind this story that I want to get into with you guys. So guys, Canada is not debating pipelines in a vacuum anymore. While Ottawa talks about approvals and timelines, the United States is mobilizing capital, mobilizing refineries, and foreign policy at speed. Guys, this is no longer about climate debates or internal politics. It's about whether Canada can move fast enough to matter, essentially to matter in a world that has already started rearranging energy flows without us. The world's not waiting for us, guys. And give you guys a bit of a wider context of what's in the article. We have the Alberta Premier, Danielle Smith, is demanding that Ottawa approve major energy projects within 6 months, not 2 years. Her warning is extremely blunt. The U.S. has just removed Nicolas Maduro, secured American investment into Venezuelan oil infrastructure, and is preparing to flood the market, the U.S. market, with heavy crude that directly competes with Canadian oil. But not only the U.S. market, I think is going to impact Asian markets as well. Danielle Smith doesn't say it in the story. This is my opinion. Ottawa's response so far has honestly just been extremely cautious language. There's been process assurances and there's been no actual commitment to speed. Guys, this is a massive disconnect in this story. The reality and what Ottawa's politics actually are. So let's get into it real quick because I think it's just phenomenal. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is calling on Ottawa to further speed up its approval process for major projects, saying she wants to see applications green-lit within 6 months. I mean, the whole thing should have been green-lit in 6 months ago, to be honest. We should have been breaking ground by now. Prime Minister Mark Carney's Major Projects Office, established last year, currently aims to complete regulatory reviews within 2 years. Why does it take 2 years for regulatory reviews? It would make sense that it would take like a year, 2 years to actually like plan out how you're going to build the thing and not sign off on paperwork. Regulatory reviews. Whose feelings are we going to hurt? Like, come on. Smith, in a letter to Carney shared on social media Friday, said that 2 years is too long considering the U.S. recent capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and U.S. President Donald Trump's plan to ramp up oil production in the South American country. It goes, renewed Venezuelan crude production supported by United States investment will ultimately increase the amount of heavy oil bound for U.S. refineries and directly compete with Canadian production for limited refining capacity, Smith said in the letter. The premier, who said she had a positive meeting with Carney on Friday discussing the developments in Venezuela, has previously said Maduro's capture underscored the need for new pipelines, including one to the West Coast being pitched and planned by her government. I want to stop here right now because we're talking about building a pipeline to the West Coast for export purposes. Why are we not using Canadian oil across the country? Why is there not a pipeline? Like, if we want to really diversify, we should diversify coast to coast. There should be pipelines going from Alberta all the way to the Atlantic provinces. And all of Canada should be using Canadian oil. And then if we can, then we can make export markets to Europe if you wanted to, right? As well, right? Not only to Asia. But we would also use our own oil. I don't understand what the problem is behind this. Is it going to cost money? Absolutely, it's going to cost money. But you know what? The Russians just built a goddamn pipeline, literally from Siberia all the way down into China. They also built a railway that goes from Moscow all the way to Beijing. So I don't understand what the problem is with building serious infrastructure in Canada. If we truly want to be independent of the US in the way that Canadian politicians want us to be, or at least that's their rhetoric, but everything I've been seeing in the comment section and in general on Twitter, on X, sorry, it's all geared towards that. Canadians want independence. We want to be self-sustaining. That's the way you build self-sustainment, man. It says, Smith's letter says an application for such a pipeline will be submitted by June and asks that it be approved no later than fall. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre called for an even quicker approval of Alberta's desired pipeline, saying Ottawa should sign off on it within 60 days of receiving the application. A route for the pipeline and private sector proponent have yet to be determined. So, like, you can't even have private investment if it's only a memorandum of understanding. There's no confirmed timelines of anything, so why there can't be any private investment. But this is key here, guys, and this is my tell on where this is going right now. So these next couple of paragraphs here. It says, Smith said in her letter that within the current geopolitical context, timelines of up to 2 years are still woefully long and put Canada at risk, especially since the US is accelerating its own oil and gas projects. Any delay risks ceding market share, losing investment, and undermining Canada's competitive position in a rapidly changing global energy landscape. Trump met with executives from 17 major oil companies Friday, saying he expected at least $100 billion in investments to expand oil production in Venezuela, which has the largest proven reserves in the world. The president also promised government protection for those investments, saying the U.S. was able to work with Delcy Rodriguez, Venezuela's interim president, and that the companies would be dealing with his administration directly when it comes to oil. And then you have this. Smith's letter says there is proven demand for Alberta's heavy oil in Asia, and that a new pipeline and an expansion of the existing Trans Mountain pipeline connecting her province to BC Tidewater would secure further investments and stabilize prices. This is key here, guys. Trump, on a whim, not only did he abduct a sitting president, he also, 3 days later, gets together with all of the CEOs of 17 major oil companies, and he's like, hey guys, we're going to be investing in Venezuela, and we're going to be pulling their crude out. You're going to be doing it. No ifs, ands, or buts. Execution, guys. Canada lacks it. Canada seriously lacks it. And this is really how I see all of this kind of shaping out, guys. Here's the reality that I see Ottawa just systematically avoiding here. Guys, this isn't a regulatory debate. We're in a race. Venezuela already has refineries. They were confiscated from U.S. companies years ago by Hugo Chavez. So the U.S. built Venezuelan oil refineries. Hugo Chavez confiscated them. And now U.S. companies are back. They're damaged, but they're there. And so the U.S. has now gathered, you just read it with me, oil CEOs and promised protection, capital, political backing, probably even militarily, to be honest. Guys, that means refurbishment can start essentially immediately. Immediately. Canada, by contrast, Guys, is talking about a pipeline with no confirmed route, no private proponent yet. There's years of permitting still in front of us, and years of construction. And obviously weather-dependent build seasons, because all of Canada is cold. Your building season is a couple months. In the south, in the north, it's probably even worse. So if I had to place a bet, I would honestly bet that Venezuelan refineries are refurbished before Canada builds its pipeline. Maybe even breaks ground, to be honest. And guys, this isn't ideological at all. It hurts me to say all of this. Guys, this is mechanical. And markets reward speed, and Canada is moving at Canadian speed, and the market is moving essentially at American speed. And this whole story, Canada's Asia diversification, we do need to diversify, guys. We do need to diversify. Ottawa keeps talking about this big Asian diversification as this big opportunity to not be reliant on the US. But what's missing from this whole narrative, guys? What is missing from this whole narrative? If the US is going to finance, rebuild, and manage Venezuelan oil production, it's going to control where those barrels go. The US is going to be buying crude. They're going to be refining it in the US. Okay? And the US already has these deep energy security relationships with Japan and South Korea. The deals were already signed in this summer. Massive LNG and energy deals. The frameworks were established, and the energy is going to get bundled with diplomacy, security, and trade. And the US can protect its energy assets that are going to Asia. Canada can't compete with that bundle. Canada exports barrels. The US is going to export barrels with leverage, right? So when Ottawa wants its pipelines to Asia, the uncomfortable question becomes, which Asian buyer is going to wait for years for Canadian oil when the US is going to be delivering oil sooner, in volume, with political backing, probably even military backing? Guys, Canada isn't diversifying to Asia. We're arriving late to a market that the US is already organizing. I see all of this as a sovereignty failure. This is by and far a massive political failure that's leading to sovereignty failure for Canada, right? This is not a resource issue. Canada does not lack oil, guys. We don't lack the oil. We don't lack any demand either for that oil. And Canada does not lack customers. What Canada lacks is the ability to act decisively when the geopolitical environment shifts. Will Canada be able to find oil even if the US owns the Asian oil markets? Probably. Okay. Will Canada be the one setting the price? No. That's the problem. We're going to be price takers. And 2-year approvals might make sense in a stable world. But honestly, to be honest, 2-year approvals never make any fucking sense. That's just stupid red tape bureaucracy that exists. But they make no sense, even less sense, when competitors are moving immediately. The US isn't waiting. The demand for energy isn't waiting either. So Ottawa saying it's too early to speculate, guys, that's not neutral. Markets speculate instantly, and they incorporate those prices in real time, right? Every month of delay costs investment, it shrinks leverage, and it locks Canada further into being a price taker. Guys, a serious country treats energy as a strategic resource, like gold, like uranium, like all of the things that Canada fucking has. But Canada treats it all as an administrative file. And what this really means for Canadians, guys, and this isn't abstract, honestly. If Canada loses market share, government revenues fall, jobs are going to disappear, investments are going to dry up, and fiscal pressure is just going to increase everywhere else, guys. And those markets are gone. They don't really come back easily. People sign decade-long energy agreements. That is why the EU was tied to Russian energy. Even when the conflict broke out, the special military operation, the EU was still buying Russian energy. Why? And the Russians were still selling them energy. Why? Because they're locked into a 10-year agreement with Gazprom. So these things, they don't just end. They don't end, right? Energy customers sign long-term relationships. They do not wait for countries that can't decide. And the real question here is, who's accountable for all this garbage, man? Canadians should ask a simple question. If the US can mobilize capital, rebuild infrastructure, and secure markets in months, why does Canada need years just to decide? Guys, this isn't about environmental reviews versus development. It's about whether Canada still believes it should compete at all. And when you have a prime minister who says, "Oh yeah, people are gonna want to buy Canadian oil because it's carbon competitive. You know, it's carbon competitive." Who gives a fuck? Who cares? Do you think that these 17 oil companies that are going to be refurbishing plants in Venezuela are going to be carbon competitive? They don't care. They're going to make it at the cheapest cost possible, and they're going to ship it to the U.S. And the U.S. isn't going to, when they refine it in the U.S., they're not going to be carbon competitive. They don't care. And then they're going to sell it to South Korea and to Japan. Not carbon competitively. No one cares. Guys, this moment, to wrap it all up, this moment should be a wake-up call for everybody. Guys, the world is not waiting for Canada to get comfortable. It's moving fast. The laggards are really the EU and Canada, to be honest, in the world right now. In the United States, it's reshaping energy flows as we speak actively in live time, and Asia is locking in supply. Capital is choosing certainty over hesitation. It does it every time. It's a telltale sign. Canada has the resources. It lacks political urgency. We do not have politicians in power that act urgently, ever. If we lose this window, it won't be because of Venezuela. It won't be because of Trump. We're going to blame Trump. That's all we do. We blame Trump. But it will be because Canada chose process, bureaucracy over power. And in a world that rewards speed and scale, guys, that choice has serious consequences. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please like, share, and subscribe. Stay informed, stay curious, and God bless Canada.
This is Canada. Maple syrup and La Cabernet. Kick your ass all hockey season. Mounties be riding horses. Yeah, this is Canada.